Professor Bradley now. Closest to me is Rob Muse. He is co-founder and senior counsel at the American Freedom Law Center, an expert in constitutional law. The last 13 years of his law practice have been dedicated to defending religious liberties, the freedom of speech, the right to life in state and federal and appellate courts around the country. More recently, Rob has been involved in numerous cases defending American freedoms against the growing threats of Sharia law. He has been described as by a district court judge as one of the leading attorneys in the country in the area of protecting religious freedom and speech. Rob Muse. And in the middle is Richard Thompson, President and Chief Counsel of the Thomas More Law Center. Richard spent 24 years at his professional career at the executive level of law enforcement. As Michigan's elected Oakland County prosecuting attorney for 8 years, he directed a staff of 180, including 102 lawyers, and administered an annual budget of $12 million. He gained national prominence as a prosecuting attorney for his uncompromising stand against Dr. Death, Jack Kevorkian, despite public opinion in Michigan, which overwhelmingly supported Kevorkian and physician-assisted suicide. At the Thomas More Law Center, Dick directs a highly professional and aggressive team of lawyers dedicated to the defense and promotion of religious liberty, time-honored family values, the sanctity of human life, a strong national defense, and an independent and sovereign United States of America. Richard Thompson. And again, I invite you to write your questions legibly and hand them to our volunteers, and we will use them.
Well, again, good to be with all of you. Well, that, Jerry, was pretty frightening. I mean, really, we're talking about a different way of ministry, different type of apostolate in the future. And I want to just stick, if you can fill us in a little bit more on this problem that NARTH is having and the whole reparative therapy thing. This is remarkable to me because here you have a professional association claiming that a particular type of therapeutic discipline is, quote, quackery, when in fact those who are apparently benefiting from this therapy are very happy with what's happening. So what I don't understand is why can't we just let well enough alone? Why do they have to insist that NARTH, the National Association for Reparative Therapy, why do they need the Good Housekeeping seal of approval from the American Psychological Association?
Well, the background, very briefly, is California passed a law, went into effect really quite recently in the last couple of months, which made it unlawful for a minor to be treated in this way, even if the parents and the minor, too, wanted the kind of therapy. This is the law. This is the law. And it's, stems from, I guess you might say, a lobbying campaign by the professionals. It's not as if the yokels got it in their heads at some point to get rid of NARTH or reparative therapy, but rather the profession is purging itself, you might say, of people who are practicing what the profession thinks of as a kind of quackery. But again, it's strictly something that would otherwise be given to volunteers, that is, people who willingly wanted this. And there's no denying the claims of successful treatment that proponents of reparative therapy, Joe Nicholas and others say, and people themselves say, this has worked for me. No one doubts that they're speaking sincerely. People in the profession may doubt, in some ways, the soundness of their own self-understanding, but nonetheless, that's the way it goes. At least 2 lawsuits were filed. One was thrown aside by a district court, federal court judge in California, but one lawsuit has gained some traction. I'm not really sure how this will all play out, but I think the chances are less than 50-50 that I'll have a happy ending. Now, one answer to the question you raise, Al, is, well, what could be wrong with this? I mean, isn't medicine and sexuality all about freedom of choice? One size does not fit all. You kind of do what you want, float your own boat. Well, that's generally true, but I think here, as in a few other places in our culture and in professions, freedom of choice takes a backseat to a kind of moral orthodoxy, or immoral orthodoxy, a kind of dogmatism. And behind this law and the professional pressure for it, I would say unquestionably is the view that anybody who seeks this therapy obviously doesn't want to be attracted to a man, woman. And doctors who help people rid you of that, at least so far speaking, are approving or agreeing or helping you to be rid of this unwanted attraction. And of course, that won't do, since we're going to establish, if we're the relevant professional guild, and we're going to do it through law if we have to and we can, we're going to establish that this is perfectly normal. If you find yourself attracted to someone of the same sex, there is no reason in that why you should want to be otherwise. That's the moral dogma behind this law. And it really, behind the law is not, some sinister account of malpractice or some people practicing this therapy who have really harmed kids. The guild might say that these kids, or some of them, would be harmed, but all they're really referring to is the reality that you are talking about a patient who has an unwanted attraction and is feeling anxiety and dissonance because of that. The view of the guild would be, well, get past the dissonance, and you're feeling this harm, and people who would help you try to get rid of the feeling are fostering or continuing or promoting that harm.
Yeah.
What you should do is get lined up with your feelings, because those feelings as such are completely beyond moral judgment.
This is funny, because what you've got the people who believe that human nature is relatively plastic now saying, oh no, we didn't really mean that. You are this way. We're telling you what you are. Yeah. Go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
I was going to say, this is part of a broader agenda. I mean, you got to be clear about that, because there's another lawsuit aside from the law in California. There's a lawsuit that was filed in New Jersey by the Southern Poverty Law Center, challenging one of the religious-based organizations there that does engage in this sort of therapy under the false advertisement, false business type laws in New Jersey. So it is all part of this. I think it is part of undermining traditional marriage and the natural relationship between a man and a woman, and it's undermining our society and undermining our religious values. I mean, there's no question about that. So I think it's more than that. It's part of it, and I think it's calculated as well.
Let me ask for an appropriately quick response on this. Do you expect to see religious institutions lose their tax exemption?
I don't think they will.
Okay.
No, I think I just want to make a comment about Professor Bradley's comments. Yeah. Number one, factually, as describing the situation, I think he's correct. Describing the conclusion, I think he's wrong. And I believe he's wrong because we are going to win. When I started to become a convert to the Catholic Church, Father Hardin was my spiritual advisor. The first thing he had me do is read a history of the Catholic Church. I think it was by an author by the name of John Locke. Anyway, if you read the history of the Catholic Church, you will see the Catholic Church has been involved with persecution. There's been internal turmoil throughout the 2,000 years that we've had. And it's always been able to survive. Now what you look at today is just another battle that the Catholic Church is having. And I want to go back to my personal experience when I was a prosecutor in Oakland County and I was prosecuting Jack Kevorkian. 83% of the people in Oakland County thought I should not be prosecuting him. He was characterized as the angel of mercy. 70% of the people in the state of Michigan thought that assisted suicide should be legalized. And based upon that, Jack Kevorkian and his cronies were able to get a question on the ballot, Proposition B, to legalize physician-assisted suicide. All at once, the Catholic Church in Michigan said, it's not going to happen. And when the Catholic Church and the bishops and the priests got behind defeating Proposition B, despite the fact that 70% of the people had supported it, within 4 weeks, the public opinion changed. And you know why? Every Sunday, a homily was given about the sanctity of human life. They had lawn signs, as some of you may remember, say no to Proposal B. And the parishioners were picking them up. And you could not drive down a block without seeing 3 or 4 signs. Proposal B, say no to Proposal B. They defeated physician-assisted suicide. They turned around this 70% support for it. So if the Catholic Church and our leaders get behind supporting a no vote on the HHS mandate, when I say a no vote, I'm not talking about the legal battles that we're having, but I'm talking about the culture battles that we are having. People expect the Catholic bishops to say we're going to oppose the HHS mandate. But now we're having Catholic businessmen like Tom Monahan, like Dan Weingarts, filing lawsuits saying it violates my religious beliefs. I'm not talking about some hierarchical bishop saying it's not good. I'm talking about me as a Catholic. Amen. And once the bishops get behind it, and once the church gets behind it, we will win this war. With all due respect, Professor Bradley, I was almost hearing a surrender, that we had to now bring our forces in. We could not win. And the reason I cannot fathom a surrender, because I'm also not only a member of the Catholic Church, I belong to the United States of America. And I believe if the Catholic Church is defeated, ultimately our nation will disintegrate. We are a nation that's built upon religion and morality.
Let me well, let me point something out, though. This actually plays right into something I was going to say later. The United States of America doesn't have any promise that it will prevail. The only institution that has the promise that the gates of hell won't prevail against it is the church. And that's the purpose of this conference, is to take our attention, or whatever the Lord decides to do with it, and make sure that the church remains healthy. Because, as I agree with Dick, the Catholic Church in the United States deteriorates beyond what it is now. I don't think there is any hope for this nation. But I would also remind us, let's remember where the promise lies. The promise is to the church, not to the nation. Let me go, I want to come back to that. Jerry, let me ask you on the tax exempt thing, just to get it on the record here. Do you think we'll lose tax exemption?
I mean, I think down the line, some institutions probably will.
Okay. Let's come back then, and why don't you respond to Dick on this in terms of, no, sir, look, he thinks that you were saying.
I surrendered. I mean, what else?
You did. I was just going to, well, that's my point. Yes. I want to know if you're as defeatist as Dick just portrayed you.
Well, no. I mean, Dick is perfectly right to be feisty and determined. That's perfectly right. And I am too, although I'm a little bit less theatrical about it. But perhaps one thing that he and I might actually genuinely disagree upon, I'm not sure that we do, would be in the neighborhood of what you just said, Al. That is, we need to be Catholics through all of this, and I think Catholics should always be looking for ways to evangelize and teach and exemplify the faith, no matter what their circumstances. And again, it's a caveat on my part. Maybe it looks like planning for after Versailles or after Appomattox. But you know, I raised questions about, well, if it goes badly, what will we be called upon to do? And I do mean to say, and this is not defeatist, even if some institutions like Catholic Charities and Boston Foster Services are taken away, then one looks for the door that's opened when that one is closed. And that's not defeatist, it's not triumphalist, it is just being what one should be.
No,
You know, when I first came here to Michigan, and I remember March 5th, 2000, I attended my first Mass at that small chapel in Domino's Farms. At that point, those who remember, you had to work your way through the bookstore.
There was a hole in the wall.
Yeah, there was a hole in the wall. And the celebrant that day was somebody that Mr. Thompson just mentioned, Father John Hardin. And I had moved to Michigan from North Carolina. I spent 13 years on active duty in the Marine Corps. My wife and I, thank you. Father Hardin had become a hero of ours when we were down in North Carolina reading a lot that he had written. I learned a lot about my faith from Father Hardin. So my first day here in Michigan in that chapel, to have Father Hardin be the celebrant was just, it was such an extraordinary gift for me. But as Father Hardin was, he, in his homily, and I'll never forget his homily, very, very simple, very to the point, as Father Hardin was, and he said this same line over and over again. Those of you who knew Father Hardin knew he would often repeat himself, and it was simply this: to live an authentic Catholic life, we must live the life of a martyr. And we are called to be witnesses to this world, there's no doubt, right? St. Paul reminds us to not be transformed by the mentality of this world, right? We got to stand up to these forces, and we got to be willing to be persecuted, right? Blessed are they who are persecuted in my name. But through that persecution is not failure. Through that persecution is victory. That's Christ on the cross. And we got to, I don't know how this HHS mandate is going to work itself out in the courts. But if we're going to be a witness for the faith, and I got to tell you, it was very refreshing to me to see our Catholic leaders, to see our bishops and our priests taking a leadership role on this very crucial social issue. And it has energized the faithful. There's no doubt about it. There was 44 lawsuits that were filed. Notre Dame, for goodness sakes, filed a lawsuit. My alma mater, so I can say that. So it's so important to have our leaders, but just being that witness, sometimes it's difficult, but it's not the most difficult part. The most difficult part is what's going to come next if we don't prevail. Are we willing to be that martyr for our faith? And we have to be. We have to embrace that cross. And by embracing that cross is where our true victory is. You know, Ronald Reagan, he said that our freedoms, and this is to bear in mind, our freedoms were not handed to us through the bloodstream. They must be fought for and protected at all times, lest they are just one generation away from extinction. So we are called to stand up and to fight. And as a constitutional lawyer, when I look at the Constitution, to me it does two principal things. It prevents tyranny and it protects liberty. So I'm proud of our bishops and religious leaders standing up for challenging the HHS mandate, but where were they with Obamacare? You know, when you have this power grab of the government. Is anybody surprised that after the passage of Obamacare that we have the HHS mandate? I certainly wasn't. And what's to come next? That's what we got to think. What is going to be next? And what's our role as these witnesses for this? You know, when they announced this compromise on the HHS mandate, and I know Father Pavone mentioned, we filed challenging the HHS mandate on behalf of Priests for Life in federal court in New York, and we're going to take that as far as it needs to go to the Supreme Court if necessary to assert those fundamental rights. But they're claiming to have a compromise now, where they're saying they're not going to have the individual organizations pay for this abortion mandate, but the insurance companies are going to cover it. And thankfully, the bishop said that's no compromise. And here's the thing: Kathleen Sebelius, during a hearing on Obama's budget for 2013, was asked by a congressman, how can that be the case? How can we have, contraception or services that nobody's paid for? These things aren't for free. And she said, by the reduction in the number of births, we will be saving money on health care.
Yeah,
that is a frightening proposition. So this HHS mandate is just the beginning. But we as Catholic witnesses, not only do we have to be witnesses, but we have to be willing to be martyrs for our faith.
There are a few very important directions that present themselves here. Let me just return to you, Dick, for a minute. Did you want to Did you have anything more to say in that exchange?
I don't disagree with everything that Professor Bradley said. I do believe that we have to be a witness. Okay. Okay. And the way, first of all, we brought a lawsuit on behalf of Dan Weingartz, Catholic, won that case, at least won the preliminary examination. Then we brought a lawsuit on behalf of Tom Monahan. We got a temporary restraining order. Now, bringing the lawsuit, you know, we want to win that lawsuit, Jerry, but when we bring the lawsuit, it's also an educational thing. When we file the lawsuit, we let the courts know why Mr. Monahan is so outraged by the HHS mandate. When we filed that lawsuit, almost hundreds and hundreds of papers wrote about Tom Monahan, former owner of Domino's Pizza, says the HHS mandate violates his religious beliefs, it's immoral, and it is not medicine. And that went out throughout the country, and it was an educational format. In fact, the judge, this is really interesting, the judge in the opinion that held in abeyance the HHS mandate said this, and I'm quoting from his opinion: Monahan is a member of the Catholic Church. He asserts that his Catholic beliefs are in line with Pope Paul VI, 1968 encyclical Humanae Vitae, which states, quote, any action which either before, at the moment of, or after sexual intercourse is specifically intended to prevent procreation, whether as an end or as a mean, including contraception, is a grave sin. End of quote. And the judge goes on. For instance, Monahan believes, in accordance with Pope John Paul II's 1995 encyclical Evangelium Vitae, that, quote, causing death can never be considered a form of medical treatment, but rather runs completely counter to the health profession, which is meant to be an impassioned and unflinching affirmation of life, end quote. He, at that time, was witnessing to the world about his Catholic faith, and business magazines, newspapers were quoting from that particular order of the judge. So when we file a lawsuit, Jerry, we want to win. But also, when we file a lawsuit, it's a moment for education. It's a moment to understand that we are mobilizing Catholics. If Catholics see that a businessman like Tom Monahan is ready to put his fortune on the line, then they say, well, this must be something worth fighting for. So I really think that I agree with you. We have to have a witness, and a lawsuit is another way to bring witness.
Yeah. I might have missed something, though. I'm trying to figure out in what way you guys actually disagree. I thought what Jerry was doing was saying, if in fact we lose in these areas, what are some of the ways that we can come back? So, Dick, let's go to the illustration you used. The illustration you used was
things are going to change.
No. This illustration you used. Let me go to this.
Okay.
You used the one that we love when we knocked off Kevorkian and we beat physician-assisted suicide. But and you know, Cardinal Maida was emboldened by that,
right.
And then he decided he was going to go for school choice in Michigan. Remember?
Yes.
And he lost. He lost terribly. Now, this is what I'm trying to figure out here. What happens when we lose? What are the options at that point?
Well, first of all, you bring up school choice. That was a political decision that was made by people outside of Cardinal Maida. That was a political decision that was made, I think, by I forgot who the individual was, that he wanted to have school choice statute in a certain way. Yeah. Others thought that maybe you should get a income tax deduction or a tax break for school choice. So I don't think that's a good analogy.
Because
I think the good analogy is this.
Okay.
Dr. Nathanson, the most outrageous abortionist, he admitted to 75,000 abortions. Okay. He ultimately became pro-life. And one day he was addressing the priests, and he said to them, you know, you could have stopped abortion and you could have stopped Roe v. Wade if you had spoken out, but you kept quiet, and we were able to take over the media, and we were able to influence the courts. So I really have faith that if the bishops stand fast on the HHS mandate, we will win. We have to win, or our country is going to disintegrate. Your children are not going to have, or your grandchildren are not going to be able to live in a free society.
would you say that if they don't stay firm on this, that we can expect to see the Catholic Church deteriorate in the United States?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's an option on that. They have set the
I
line.
agree.
They said there's going to be civil disobedience.
Right.
I expect them
Right.
to have civil disobedience.
I do too.
Cardinal George said a few years ago, I'm going to die in my bed. My successor is going to die in prison. His successor is going to be a martyr. They are ready to do that. They are having, they are calling the clarion. They're sounding the clarion call. There's that verse someplace, who shall prepare for battle at the sound of an uncertain trumpet? We have a certain trumpet now. The bishops have spoken. All we have to show is that we support them and we're ready to fight for them. And so I don't think there is a choice there.
I agree. This is going to be fought to the end. I don't think the bishops are going to back down on it. By the way, I talked to Cardinal George about that illustration just a few weeks ago, in fact. There's a fourth instance there. He's going to die in his bed. His successor is going to die in prison. His successor is going to die a martyr. And his successor is going to die rebuilding the culture. And that's where I thought Jerry was. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure I see that much disagreement here in principle at all. I think we're looking at the circumstances. But I'll tell you, this is the kind that you ought to be absolutely delighted that this is the caliber of lay discussion that we've got. Yeah.
Al, can I say something here?
Yeah, please.
I see these, I see these nuns in habits right here.
Yeah.
They are the future. They're the future because they are educating our children, okay? They're the Dominican Sisters, Mary Mother of the Eucharist. There was a Supreme Court case that talked about Catholic education, and that's one of the things we have to talk about. The other side has taken over our school systems. It's become an indoctrination center. And at one point, here's what somebody said. I should be surprised if any Catholic would deny that the parochial school is a vital, if not the most vital part of the Roman Catholic Church. If put to the choice, that venerable institution, I should suspect, would forego its whole service for mature persons before it would give up education of the young, and it would be a wise choice. Its growth and cohesion, discipline, and loyalty spring from its schools. Catholic education is a rock on which the whole structure rests. And then he went on. That was a Supreme Court justice saying that in a case, okay? We have hope as long as we have the educational system that is going to bring our young kids up in a Catholic education, knowing the catechism of the church. And so that's the other issue, Professor Bradley. We've got young people lined up on fire with the faith. We just have to increase that. And I would ask the bishops to, instead of closing down schools, starting to open up more schools and also make it more affordable for Catholics who are supposed to have children and who are supposed to educate them in the Catholic faith so they can do that.
If I can, on this, there's tremendous hope out there. I know that, Professor Bradley had mentioned that, my wife and I have been blessed to have 12 children. And as I like to say, all of them are boys except for 10. And so the motto of my home is, blessed are you among women. But the point is, when we are out, even in Ann Arbor, Michigan, right, the belly of the beast, people recognize that.
Yep.
They recognize God's grace in there. And I can't tell you how many people come up to me and they say, are you Catholic?
Yeah.
But what a tremendous witness. And the fact that they realize that. And they realize that is a good. I mean, there is tremendous hope out there. Don't believe the media. Don't believe the secular elite. There is tremendous hope out there. I look out here, 700 plus people on a Saturday afternoon. That tells me something. That tells me something. There's tremendous hope out there.
You know it's getting bad when they start to say, well, are you Mormon? Then you know you got trouble.
Yeah, it's mostly the Catholic. It's good.
We're limited here time-wise. You guys are great. Let me get a quick response on this. It sounded, Jerry, that as you were, musing about the future here, that we may well see a redefinition, religious liberty being transformed or reduced to a so-called freedom of worship. Is that, in your estimation, is that likely to happen?
It's already happening insofar as the meaning of the exemption, which is too limited in the mandate situation, the exemption that's created in this Illinois bill that I referred to, the same-sex marriage bill, you can see that opinion in a substantial sector of our society, including the Obama administration, is coalescing around that view, that religious freedom really pertains to what happens within the church, maybe within the parish, but it has to do with the relationships and the speech among the already converted. That's it. Yeah. But they would say something like this. But when you go out into the commercial world and in the public sphere, you can't expect to be able to do what you want to do. You have to compromise. Yeah. Yeah. So what's diminished in value, surprisingly, so much, even in the last 20 years, is understanding of and respect for what I called discipleship earlier. Yeah. But I think that one thing that's happening to us is that generally as a society, there's just less and less value placed upon living a life of wholeness and integrity. And someone like, let's say, St. Thomas More, right? Just saying, I can't, won't do that, even though in Thomas More's case, you could see there are a lot of bad consequences to becoming a martyr. I mean, his family, yeah. Thomas, think of all the good you could have done for the poor people of England, which you're not going to do if you're dead. Yeah,
all you had to do was say yes.
All you had to do was say yes. So I think the view that prizes that as a witness of unsurpassable value is in our rearview mirror, I'm sad to say.
Okay. Dick, do you think we're going to have that redefinition in this country from religious liberty
I think
to worship?
they're trying to do that. Yeah. I think that's what they're trying to do.
And
that's what the church is saying, wait a minute, we're more than what's within the four walls. We have all these ministries. That's a part of the Christian mission, and that's a part of the Catholic mission. So they're trying to do that. We're fighting back. Ultimately, we're going to win. Rob?
I agree. And the other component of this, where ever since the Smith case came down, where they talk about neutral laws of general applicability, which was written by Scalia, which undermined quite a bit the religious exercise and free religious exercise rights, where we're finding that we can still have a great deal of attraction is when we tie those right to free exercise with the right to freedom of speech. So the right to evangelize, the right to express God's word, there's still a great deal of strength in terms of vitality in the First Amendment to protect that. But certainly, I think we're seeing a slow erosion of the free exercise, and the way to do it is, as Mr. Thompson and I are doing, fighting it in court and changing that trend. Right. And I'm hopeful that we will.
Yeah, very good. We're going to have to end it there. But I want to say again, for lay people, this is the issue of the future. It has to do with defining what it means to be a Catholic, and whether being a Catholic means that you act out of a robust discipleship in all areas of life, or if you become just a religious contemplative which stays within your own chosen boundaries. For laity, that's simply unacceptable. Okay? We don't take vows of stability like that. So this, we have never seen anything like this before in our history. You take a look at every social crisis in our history, it's almost always lay people who are out there, whether you're talking about slavery, you're talking about prohibition, you're talking about communism, you're talking about civil rights, you're talking about abortion. It's lay people from various traditions who are out there doing what they're supposed to do. This definition changes, and you got no protections, constitutional protections in those areas. We'll have to end it there, though. Guys, thank you so much. I wish we had more time.